Nina had absolutely no idea that her life was about to change in a matter of seconds. Between the monotonous beep of a supermarket checkout and the bland smell of damp cardboard in a back room, her phone vibrated in the pocket of her work apron. She absent-mindedly wiped her clammy hands on her rough tights, picked up the device and read the message. Once, then a second time, then a third, because her mind refused to believe it. Her grandfather, Ivan Petrovich Sokolov, had just died, and according to his will, he left her an inheritance. A house in the village of Lipovka by the river. At that very moment, all the noise of the store seemed to fade away. The squeaky wheels of the carts, the children whining, the scanners beeping endlessly, everything became a blur. Sitting on a dusty crate in the dark storeroom, which smelled of cleaning products and damp paper, Nina felt her hands tremble so much that she nearly dropped her phone. Her grandfather! Those words awakened in her an entire world she thought was buried, blurry memories like an old, damaged film reel. She saw herself again as a child, clinging to his strong back that smelled of tobacco and the river as he took her fishing. She saw herself again in the vegetable garden, hearing him say to her in his deep, gentle voice, "But potatoes sprout upwards, Nina, always towards the sun." She remembered him on the porch, his eyes squinting in the light, murmuring with immense tenderness, "You, my little girl, you are my joy." And then, nothing more. Nothing more, because one day her mother had decided, coldly, brutally, "He abandoned us. Forget him." So Nina obeyed, or rather, she pretended to forget, the way you bury a sorrow too great for a child. For 20 years, she had lived as if this man had never existed, and yet deep inside, something had never stopped belonging to him. That evening when she got home, soaked from the rain, her husband Andrei was sitting in the kitchen, hunched over his plate, swallowing his soup without even looking up. Nina took off her coat, stood for a few seconds, then softly said, his grandfather had died and he had left him a house. At the word mortgage, Andrei put down his spoon. But his face showed neither sadness, nor surprise, nor compassion. Only a cold, immediate, practical interest. He asked where it was, if it was far, how much land there was. 2 hours by train, Nina replied. Then he said, as if it were obvious, "Perfect, we'll sell it. With that, we can finally make the down payment for the mortgage." Nina remained frozen, a cup in her hand. She looked at him. "It's my house," she said slowly, emphasizing the word my. Andrei finally looked up at her, and in his eyes there was no warmth. "What do you mean, your house? You're my wife, aren't you? So what's yours is ours. Did you forget that?" Nina didn't answer. She knew that with him, arguing was like banging your head against a wall until you bled. The next day, like every Sunday, they went to have lunch at Andrei's mother's house. Raisa Stepanovna was one of those women who take up the whole room even before they speak. Massive, authoritarian, self-assured, she ruled over her little kitchen as if it were a kingdom. The smell of borscht, boiled cabbage and sour cream filled the air. No sooner had Andrei started eating than she asked with that barely concealed eagerness that resembled family curiosity, "So, tell me, what inheritance has fallen upon our family?" Andrei answered straightforwardly. "A house in the countryside, which he would probably sell." But he had barely spoken when Raisa exclaimed, "Sell it? Are you crazy? The Hipovka, I know it. There's fresh air, a river, a garden. It's exactly what I need. Me, I'll go live there for the summer, or even permanently." Andrei immediately agreed, as if it were obvious. "Mom is right, Nina. The country air would do her good." And then something chilling happened. They were talking about Nina's house, her inheritance, her grandfather, as if she no longer existed in the conversation, as if her voice wasn't needed, as if her only role was to sign the papers. Isa turned to her with a sticky, insistent, almost syrupy smile. "You're not going to refuse this to an old woman, are you? We're a family. In a family, we help each other." Nina, meanwhile, was slowly stirring her cooled tea. Her son, Dima, was drawing by the window, silent, but she could feel his furtive, worried glances. She calmly replied that she hadn't finalized anything yet. But Raisa kept talking, as if everything had already been decided. Later, back at home, Andre asked curtly, "So, have you thought about it?" Nina replied, "Yes, I've thought about it. I'm not going to sell the house." The glass of kefir he was holding hit the table so hard that the liquid splashed out. "Are you crazy? We need an apartment." Nina took a deep breath. "It's the last thing I have left from my grandfather." He then sneered maliciously. "In that case, Mom will live there. She's already started making arrangements." Nina looked up at him and simply asked, "Did anyone ask for my opinion?" He answered as if the question were absurd. "Helping my mother is sacred." And that's when Nina uttered the two words no one had ever heard her say with such firmness: "I refuse." The silence that followed was heavy, violent. Andre froze for a moment, almost shocked. He wasn't used to seeing his wife set a boundary. Then he went to turn on the television at full volume, as if to drown out this new voice that had finally emerged. But in the days that followed, the pressure increased yet another notch. A week later, Raisa showed up unannounced in the middle of the afternoon, as if the apartment already belonged to her. She came in, set down a simple old notebook on the table, grid-lined, carefully covered in clear plastic, sat down like she owned the place, inspected her surroundings, and cheerfully declared that it was time to move forward. Everything was already in her notebook. The list of renovations, the type of bathtub she wanted to install, the stove to buy, the linoleum for the floor, and even the detailed plan for the vegetable garden. The potatoes here, the cabbages in the center, the cucumbers along the wall. She spoke without stopping, projecting her future into this house as if Nina were nothing more than the administrative clerk. Nina remained standing near the kettle, her back tense, then repeated in a low voice. She hadn't signed yet. Rai smiled faintly. "You will sign. You're not going to say no to an old woman who needs fresh air. You don't want me to die suffocating in the city, do you?" At that moment, Dima timidly came out of his room, drawn by his grandmother's voice. He tried to say that he remembered the house a little, that he had been there as a child, that he remembered Little being his great-grandfather. But Raisa immediately interrupted him, without even looking at him, to explain that he would come help her in the garden because a large plot of land needed strong arms. The boy's face closed off. He went back to his room in silence. This small detail broke Nina's heart. Even her son was already absorbed, used as a tool, moved around in other people's plans. In the evening, Andre came home, tense, irritated, and asked again, "So? Did you get along with Mom?" Nina replied that she had mostly noticed that her mother had planned everything, down to the carrots in the garden beds. Andre shrugged his shoulders. "All the better she has experience." Nina asked again, "And what about me? Does anyone ask what I want?" This time, he didn't even bother to hide his irritation anymore. "Why do you keep repeating the same thing?" "It's my mother." Nina stared at him and replied, "Yes, and I say no." The next day, Raisa came back again, as if it had now become a full-time job. She brought a net bag of wrinkled potatoes and sprouted onions, proudly announcing that they would be for the vegetable garden. Then, without even taking off her shoes, she went into Nina and Andre's room and opened the door. She opened the wardrobe, pointed to a shelf while explaining where she would put her suitcase, and even took something out of her bag. A pair of old worn slippers that she ostentatiously placed on Nina's side of the bed, like a flag planted on conquered territory. Nina remained standing in the doorway, motionless. She looked at those slippers on her floor, near her bed, in her spot, and something inside her broke for good. That evening, Andre issued his ultimatum. His face was dark, closed off. "So, one last time, do you accept or not?" Nina replied. "I will not give up this house, neither to sell it nor to turn it into a home for your mother." He jumped to his feet. "In that case, I'm leaving." Nina looked him straight in the eye. "Go ahead." He almost staggered, surprised that she didn't beg him. So he hit even harder. "And I'm taking Dima with me." Nina straightened up. Her voice became icy, firm, unshakable. No, Dima stays with me. A minute later, Andre left with a travel bag, announcing that he was going to his mother's. The door slammed so hard that the windows shook. But this time it wasn't Nina who trembled. A few days later, she left for Lipovka alone. The journey took 2 hours. Through autumn fields, gray forests, small leaning houses, and a low sky. No one called her. Neither Andre nor Raisa. As if for them she no longer existed since she had stopped obeying. The house was at the edge of the village, very close to the river. It was gray, worn out, with peeling paint around the windows, a yard overgrown with tall grass, and a gate, which creaked like an old complaint when she opened it. As she entered, Nina smelled dust, old wood, time standing still, but also something deeply familiar, something that came straight from her childhood. The house seemed to be waiting, as if her grandfather had simply stepped out for a few minutes. The old Russian stove was still there, the large oak table with its crack down the middle, the iron bed. And under that bed, a chest bound with metal. Nina knelt down and opened the chest. Inside, there were embroidered scarves, yellowed photographs, a box of buttons, and, in the midst of it all, a bundle of letters tied with string. She immediately recognized the handwriting on the envelopes. It was her mother's. With her heart pounding, she opened one, then another, and then yet another. And line after line, the truth emerged with a silent cruelty. Her grandfather had never abandoned her. It was her mother who had severed the ties. It was she who had forbidden Nina to write, she who had decided alone that the child would forget, she who had chosen on her behalf what would be better. The letters spoke of regrets, of guilt, of little Nina crying at night, of that father who waited for news of his only little girl, never ceasing to love her. Sitting on the dusty floor, the bundle pressed to her chest, Nina wept. No anger, not even hatred. Just that immense, belated, irreparable pain of discovering too late that you had been loved all along. He had not abandoned her, he had waited for her.